Good morning, everybody. We're here with the Dom DeMarco Show, 9785 West Charleston. Great Italian food, great service. Andy Isco and I'm Jim Feist, and we're going to talk some sports. We're going to cover a variety of sports. We're not quite into the football season yet, but we're certainly into the preseason. Andy,
Good
there
morning.
you are. There I am.
There we are.
The Dodgers, probably the safest bet in all the world to win the World Series this year.
Again.
At least win the National League pennant. And now, right now, they're looking like chopped liver. What has happened?
The pitching has always been a question mark for them this year. They don't have quite the depth of the staff with some injuries, etc., as they've had in the past, although guys like Yamamoto and, of course, Ohtani now, who won't be pitching as much. But there's not a lot of quality depth behind them. Diaz, the closer, is having his issues now. But more importantly, it's the playoff teams like Milwaukee right now, who actually has the lead in the seeding for the playoffs at 77-48. That's let me see if I can do my quick math. That's a 2.5 game lead over the Dodgers for the number 2 seed. And the Dodgers are basically just a half game ahead of the Atlanta Braves for the number 3 seed. Of course, the 3 division winners get the top 3 seeds. But as you and I were talking before we started the program, the Cubs at 73-53 can still chase down the Brewers. They could end up with the second best record in the National League and yet be the top wild card. And that's something we talk about in all the sports. And for example, even in football, where you could have a team win, go 14-3, and another team go 13-4, and that 13-4, which would be the second best record in all of the NFL. I think last year it would have been, close to that, but they could end up coming in as a wild card. And of course, it's a little bit different in the NFL, which is a 1-game playoff season. But that means you could have the second best record in the sport and not host a playoff game, or at least not host a first round playoff game.
Wild stuff.
Yeah. The Dodgers, I'll tell you, I was just doing a showdown with some folks down in Baton Rouge. We happen to be talking about baseball, and the question was, can anyone challenge the Dodgers? And I answered it thusly. I said, well, if you take a look at what the Brewers did with the Dodgers over the weekend, they've got to have a great deal of confidence, and they're right there. Well, as I said, they're a game and a half ahead, or 2.5 ahead right now. But if you go to the American League, you have to give it where I don't think there really is any clear-cut favorite. You have to take a look at what the Red Sox have done going back all the way to June. So they're very much a factor in the American League right now. Let me see if I can call those wild card standings up. You've got the Rays, the White Sox, and the Astros. Right now, the Red Sox are the number 2 seed. The number 2 wild card. They are looks like about 2.5 behind the Yankees, and they are actually about 8.5, which may not be able to catch the Rays, but they're certainly making a run. And considering their start to the season, that's a little bit of a surprise. But if you're playing with great momentum, and the Red Sox don't have the greatest roster, but it's a cohesive roster, and they've been playing well. They've been getting good, solid pitching. Chris Sale is having a very good year. Sonny Gray is having a surprisingly good year, and he was a question mark coming into the season. In fact, he drew a lot of money on his season win total. I think the number was 11, and I think it closed down at 8.5 or 9. So and he hit that weeks ago on the over. Wow. So they've been doing very well. So they're a surprise. So I think the Dodgers deserve to be the strong favorite. I know the books have a lot of action at very short prices. So it's always interesting. Who's your greatest liability? And very often the books will say it's not the team with the best record, but it's a team, that has a pretty good record. But I think this year they have to be overloaded on the Dodgers simply because of what they've done the last few years with all the talent and the payroll, and they strengthened themselves in the offseason with some of the acquisitions.
Yeah, you would have to think the books are very happy the Dodgers are struggling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what it's going to do, it's going to attract more money. The Dodgers are still the favorite, but it'll attract more money on the long shots, and that's where the books will make a lot of their money. They very rarely have a lot of liability on a long shot that wins a championship. Not always, but usually.
I've heard comments about the Dodgers. They're older. They're a little more brittle. Maybe they're a little bit fat and happy, because they've done so well. Maybe they've run out of gas.
They are old. I think the roster, though the offense is still very strong, but it has struggled a little bit. I think Ohtani and Freeman both had big nights last night at Colorado. I think Ohtani was 4 for 5 and Freeman was 3 for 5, and those two are really leading the way. In fact, they're batting 1-2 right now. At least they did last night in the lineup. But the pitching staff is a little bit of a concern, and I guess Diaz, who's had his ups and downs really over the last 4 or 5 years. I think the Mets got him from Seattle. And then he left the Mets and went to, I think it was the Dodgers, right, directly. And he's been a little bit off lately. But, again, as you know, in all the sports, I'll say football, the NBA, I think, is a perfect example. The playoffs are totally different. The speed changes, the concentration, the thought between pitches changes. So it's you still like to go with the best teams, but the gap certainly. I don't think anyone expected the Dodgers to be challenged at this deep into the season, where they've now played about 125, 130 games, I believe. Let me see, 126, I guess, in the case of the Dodgers. I don't think anybody expected them not to be only the number one seed, but probably not to have more than, say, a 6 to 10 game lead over whoever was the second best record.
Well, so much for baseball at the moment. It's pretty hot and heavy. A lot of decisions are going to have to be made over the next couple of weeks in baseball. Who's coming? Who's going to make it?
Yeah.
We just watched a crazy week in the NFL preseason. All the teams that had 3-point moves, and these are some. There's not a lot of money goes in preseason, but there's enough. 3-point moves in preseason is not like a regular season game.
Right.
But any game that had a 3-point or more move pretty much went 0-10-1.
Yeah. Dogs had a very good day, and Dogs even had a very good day, or weekend, I should say, started on Thursday straight up. And that's, again, and I don't really participate in the preseason because, as I've stated almost every week since we talked about it, the goal of the coaches. Now, some coaches try to win. Well, they want to win, but they don't necessarily try their best to win, but they just have deep enough rosters and enough backups that they can win, like John Harbaugh all those years with the Ravens. But the smart coaches know the goal is to A, get your best 53-man roster ready to start the season. B, learn about what you need to work on next week in practice. And C, do your best to avoid injuries. In fact, this was another topic I was just talking about half hour ago. And I said, you see a lot of games. We had more unders, I think, at least in week 1, but we see in the early games. But we see a lot of these games. I'm sorry, we had more overs, I thought, than expected, but in some of these games. But we also see teams that understand preseason. And I really wish they would eliminate preseason games because of all the injuries that we've already seen, a number of season-ending injuries. And here we are, 1 week into the preseason and maybe 2 weeks into practice. But I think the philosophy a lot of these coaches should take, first of all, they eliminated overtime in preseason, which was long, pardon the pun, overdue. But nonetheless, the coaches should take more of an approach, emphasize more of the short passing game if you're going to do that, emphasize the running game so that instead of running 60 offensive plays like you do in a regular season, maybe you cut that down to 48 to 50. So there's 10 to 12 fewer plays on which you can risk injury on either side of the football. And that's because the clock won't stop, because you won't have as many incomplete passes as you do if you have a heavy passing game. I think coaches get a lot of their work done during the weeks of practice, and we've seen more and more. We saw it last week. We're seeing it again this week, that teams that are about to play each other in a preseason game will scrimmage during the week, and that's where they'll get a lot of the work done, especially I think it's probably the majority, if not all, because I don't like to say all or none, but I would say that the vast majority of those scrimmages are between teams that won't face each other during the regular season.
What you're saying, Andy, is a lot can be accomplished in practice and scrimmage against each other, and not really playing a game with an outcome. Well, there was a time, and wasn't there a time when we had like 8 preseason games?
We had 6 preseason games and a 14-game regular season schedule until the.
Okay.
I think it actually occurred after the merger for a few years, and I think it was when the 2 new teams came into the league. I think it was Seattle and Tampa Bay, perhaps, that they cut the schedule down. They increased the schedule from 14 to 16 games, and they cut the preseason down from 6 to 4, which is now down to 3, thankfully. And they made at least a smart decision, is that instead of cutting out week 1 and play weeks 2, 3, and 4, they cut out week 4 and play weeks 1, 2, and 3. But I'd like to see that cut even further. But again, it's a moneymaker. In fact, I saw something today. I saw a headline. I didn't read the story, but Goodell said, "Oh, it's only a matter of time before I have an NFL team based outside the United States." Now, whether that means Toronto or Canada or Mexico, it's coming. And preseason, whatever it offers additional money to the league. So I can't see them eliminating that, even though this league, which promotes, well, we're all about safety of the players, doesn't understand.
Oh yeah, sure they are. Sure they are. It sometimes I wonder about. No, I always wonder about that because it doesn't. The words don't match the music.
Well,
but
exactly. But it's a business. And the players are replaceable assets.
It's a business, and it's all about making money.
Yeah.
Right. So
which by the way, I don't mind them making money, but don't cover it up and try saying things that it's not. Admit, hey, we're doing it for money. Now, some people will say, you're getting too greedy, but most people, I would think, will understand that's what business is all about. So don't lie to us about it. Tell us that, okay, it's for money. You may not like it, but at least you can respect the fact that they're coming up and telling you the truth.
Well, look at the people that own these teams. They're mostly millionaires or billionaires, probably billionaires. But I think the last preseason game is August 23rd. Is that correct? August 27th.
Yeah, which I believe is the week before the Labor Day weekend.
Is that the Pittsburgh Buffalo game?
I believe it is. Yeah. But remember, they have the following week off. So it's not Labor Day weekend. It's the weekend before Labor Day. That is or 2 weeks before Labor Day. That is the final game.
The regular season starts
on the 9th of September.
New England, Seattle.
Yes. And the final preseason game is on the 29th. It's actually the day after week 0 in college football, where they have 8 games. So they basically have 11 days off between the final preseason. Well, there are 2 of them on Saturday, the 29th. So actually that is the date of week 0 of college football. So they actually have, let's see, almost 2 full weeks, about 12 days off, I think, 11 or 12 days before that first Wednesday game.
The lines for the first week are up, and probably not a lot of our viewers know that, but they are.
Well, if they follow a lot of these line services, whether they're free or paid, they've had them up. Actually, they came. I think one site came out with the lines about an hour after the schedule was announced.
That would be DraftKings or FanDuel, right?
Probably, most likely.
Yeah.
I know DraftKings is. In fact, DraftKings, I've got it somewhere on my computer. They actually have the lines out for all 18 weeks of the regular season, sides and totals. Now, Westgate used to do that in years past, and I used to love going down there, picking up the package of the 16 weeks and those were not hypothetical lines. Those were lines they could actually bet. So somebody was visiting Vegas, on August 20th, and they want to bet every Bears game, let's say. They could bet all 18 games at once. Now, the Westgate didn't do that this year because of the partnership now with Caesars Sportsbook. In other words, Caesars is now providing the lines and the betting function. Well, Westgate you can still bet at Westgate, deposit and withdraw from your phone accounts, but they're all using Caesars numbers, and so they did not find it meaningful, since they couldn't really book a lot of those games late in the season, to do that. I think if you made your bets at Westgate, they'll still be honored. I'm not quite sure if you get paid off by Westgate or Caesars, but I'll find out at the end of the season, hopefully, with some of my future bets.
Okay. What have we seen so far in the preseason that's really shocking, positively or negative? And are there any injuries one that I'd like to bring up is I mentioned it a couple times in the offseason. I mean, John Harbaugh went from Baltimore to the Giants, and Jackson Dart, of course, is their quarterback.
Yeah.
And but last year he spent a good bit of his time in the blue tent, and he's already been in the blue tent.
Yeah.
I mean, is this what is wrong with his style of play that is leading him to being in the blue tent so much? Because if that's the case, he's going to miss a lot of time.
My question is, what's wrong with the offensive coordinator for calling plays that put him in that position in a meaningless preseason game?
Well, that's a good point. But going back to last year,
in fact, he shouldn't even be playing in the preseason. We know what he can do.
Good point. Well, they had Arizona had a running back. I think it was Love.
Yeah.
They ran him 14 times in a preseason
and already
game.
He's
why this rookie coach sounded like a fool when they asked him why he did that? It made absolutely no sense. It just shows you that not every coach is equal, not every quarterback is equal, not every.
He gave the old humana answer.
Yeah, that was exactly right. So, what else have you seen that would lead us to believe there's we've made some mistakes in our quality or our analysis of these teams going forward?
It's hard to say because the majority of the starters did not play or played maybe one series. So, that's another thing with the preseason. If you're trying to win games, if your starters are going to play the first drive of the game, that doesn't make sense. If you want to win a game, have them play the second half of the fourth quarter when a lot of these games are decided. So that in and of itself tells you what actions speak louder than words. We want to win. We'll play our reserves who won't even be here next week to do so.
Yeah, exactly. But every once in a while,
a lot of work gets done, and a lot of.
And how bad?
That's what these preseason games are, to find guys who maybe you didn't think highly enough of when you drafted them or when you signed them.
Who looks to be the worst 4 teams in the NFL? To you?
Well, I think, and again, you can't really base it on what we see in the preseason because you're basically talking about second and third teamers and guys who aren't going to be there. Now, right now, with the exception of Carolina and Arizona, who played in the Hall of Fame game, we saw a lot of that last week as far as guys who aren't going to make the team. So they're fighting for roster spots. But if I had to say, I was as a long time, but a long time suffering New York Jets fan. That's what I grew up being a fan of. Although I like both the Giants and the Jets. I actually like the Eagles as well, which is kind of interesting. But those are loyalties from other parts of my life that I grew up. But the Jets, way too many penalties. I think they only had 6, but there were a couple that were declined or not accepted, other for plays. They looked very sloppy in their game against Tampa Bay. So I would have them as one of the teams that I expect to be improved, but we can't really tell it because what we're seeing, again, even with penalties, we're seeing it with guys who aren't going to be on the team, with lineups that aren't going to be the same, different, personnel for situations, etc. Miami is still considered, I think, one of the weakest teams in the league based on the roster and the transition with a new quarterback going with, the quarterback Willis from Green Bay last year. Cleveland is expected to be one of the weakest teams. They look
horrible. Horrible.
Well, I mean, I like the fact that they got Verse in that trade with the Rams for Myles Garrett. The quarterback between Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson, I guess, will decide who's going to start. And Monken comes over. I think he was the offensive coordinator at Baltimore, and he is an innovative coach. Worked with Lamar Jackson, so he may improve the offense, which was just absolutely horrible. So I think a lot of people, and I think I got the text from you. I think a lot of people here in Vegas are looking at it to be the Browns. However, I will point out that they are playing in a division where you've got 2 other new coaches. You got McCarthy, who's an experienced coach, but his first year with Green Bay. With Pittsburgh. Baltimore's now got Jesse Minter, first-time head coach, coming over. He's with the Ravens before on the staff under John Harbaugh, I think in the late teens. He comes over defensive coordinator from the Chargers. And then, of course, you've got Zach Taylor, who's the coach at Cincinnati. So there may be some wins that Cleveland could get by virtue of going
Andy,
up.
Not to interrupt you, the problem is they all have reasonably quality
Quarterbacks, yes.
And
Well, certainly in the case of Burrow and Jackson for Cincinnati and Baltimore.
Yeah, and last year Rodgers did not have a terrible statistical
Not at all.
No, so I mean, I can't see that Cleveland can match up at all at the quarterback position with any of those three teams.
No, they can't. So I can understand it. I'm just taking into account, before being so quick to say that they're going to be the team with the worst record, take a look at the fact that they're going up against teams coached by guys who may not have seen the Browns before. And remember, the Browns still, even without Myles Garrett, and you got Jared Verse in there to rush the passer and all that, create havoc, you still have a decent defense that keeps them in games. And the reasons why they won a lot of those, the number of the few games they won last year, was because the defense limited the opposing offense to 16, 17 points or something like that. So I would not be that quick. I would say Miami, probably just basis on the overall personnel. Quarterback, we don't know about Willis, but he doesn't have a lot to work with. They lost Waddle, one of the good receivers, who I think is now in Denver, if I recall correctly. The defense has a lot of holes. The Jets, I expect to be improved, but now Bryce Hall's out with an injury, the big running back, who again got injured. I didn't recall. I think he got injured in the game, not in practice. There was another guy who got injured with an injury the other day, I think, in practice, not in the game. So I think the Jets will be a contender. Arizona, I actually like what I've seen out of them in their first two games. I like the running back situation there. We saw Carson Beck look pretty good as his first two appearances. But they figure to be one of the worst teams, if only because division against the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers, 0-6. It's tough to not have.
That's a tough grind right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to see you winning more than 3 to 5 games when 6 of them are against teams that you have to figure are going to beat you. Although the Cardinals did play, I think, one of those games early. They were competitive, and I think it was the first 40. It was either the first 49 or the first Seattle game. I think it was the first 49ers game last year.
Well, Brissett's going to be their probably number one quarterback to start the season. He is experienced. He doesn't. People don't give him high marks, but he does put up points.
I think he's a good quarterback if he plays 4 to 6 games, but I'm not so sure if he has to play more than half a season, how good he would be in the long run. But look, he'll have his chance. Right
now, I would say Cleveland looks like the worst team, and you can bet that. Yeah. There are lines out who is going to be the worst team in football, and you can also bet if the team's going to have any wins whatsoever, which means they go 0-17. Win the season. Now, on the top of the league, everybody pretty much says the Rams are the best team. And that's, of course, that covers the NFC. If they're the best team in the NFC, then they go to the Super Bowl to meet who? And a lot of people said that might be Buffalo.
Defensive concerns on Buffalo. Offense should be perfect. I won't say perfect. Should be outstanding, but I think a lot of people are questioning Buffalo. I like Buffalo. By the way, here's the schedule that the Rams have to open against. The Australia game against San Francisco, then the Giants on Monday night, at Denver, playoff team, at Philadelphia, playoff team last year, home to Buffalo. And then they finally get a little of a break hosting Arizona and at Vegas. And then they host the Chargers, then a couple of road games. So they don't have the easiest start of the season, and they're going to be, and again, you have to also consider 2 of their last 3 games are against Seattle.
I mean, they do have a tough schedule in that regard.
Here's their schedule after the bye. And again, mostly playoff teams or a playoff caliber team from last year. Okay, their bye is, I think it's in week 13 or 12. Host Green Bay, host Kansas City, at San Francisco, host Dallas, at Seattle, at Tampa Bay, host Seattle. That's who they end the schedule. They're going to be worn out by the time the playoffs start.
That is a rough schedule. There's no question.
Yeah.
There's no question. Why do people downgrade Seattle? They won the Super Bowl. I think they won the Super Bowl over a very overrated New England team, but
overrated, but still a good team. Just accomplished more than we
good
thought.
enough to get there, even though they might have been lucky in a couple of games down the stretch. But people don't talk much about Seattle being a real deal. I think they're still a real deal. I mean, they have, yes, the coach is gone. That hurts, the offensive guy. But I don't think you can just roll over and say, okay, the Rams are going to win this division when Seattle is there, and they're still very, very talented.
Well, this is Mike Macdonald's third year. He took over a team that under Pete Carroll had gone 9-8 and 9-8. And I think one of those years they may have made the playoffs. I think one of those years they did. But, he took over a good team. And in his first year, 2024, 10-7. Okay, inheriting all the talent. Not good enough to make the playoffs because they lost out on tiebreakers. Okay, but last year, 17-3. So that means 14-3 in a regular season and 3 wins in the playoffs. I think it's difficult to repeat. You look at the Seattle schedule down the stretch after their open date, which I believe is the same week as the Rams. At San Francisco, home to Dallas, home to the Giants, at Philadelphia, home to the Rams, at Carolina, at the Rams. That's also not a very easy finishing stretch after their bye. But they have
right now, at this time of the year, we look at all these teams except the bottom 4 to 6, and we say, oh, they all look like they're improved, and everybody believes they're improved. So some of these teams are not going to be as good as we think they are.
No, by the way, I will mention for Seattle, and I use Mark Lawrence's playbook preview, and I would urge anyone or everyone who's watching or listening to this to get that playbook preview magazine, which can be ordered directly from Playbook. You can also find it at Barnes and Noble stores around the country, because they got a lot of point spread information and other data. And one of the data things I'm looking at is how the Seattle Seahawks defended the run last year. In 2022, they allowed 4.9, 152 per game. Following year, 4.6, 138 yards per game. So in 2024, 4.7 per rush, 126 yards per game. Last year, huge improvement, 3.8 yards per rush. That's almost a full yard better than the previous year. 94 yards per game. That's 35 yards improved. Now, okay, people say, well, what about the passing game? They must have made up for that improvement. Well, here's what the Seahawks allowed beginning in 2022 passing. 218, 233, 213, 199.
Wow.
That's impressive.
They have a very good coach. They do have a very good coach. And obviously Darnold comes in there after having a rough start to his career, but then Minnesota, he played well, and then last year he played well again.
Yep.
And from a physical standpoint, who is more likely to get hurt during the season, Darnold or the Rams quarterback? Stafford.
Stafford, yeah. You had me thinking of somebody else, and I said, I was thinking of Goff, the guy you got traded for with Detroit.
That happened a while ago.
It's been about 6 or 7 years, I think it's been.
Yeah, probably.
But I would say, just based on age, you'd have to think it would be Stafford.
Yeah.
But he's managed to stay healthy for the majority of his career. Darnold, I think he's had a few injury issues, but those were with some of the teams where he didn't get the kind of protection he had the last couple of years. So I could make cases for all 3 teams: Seattle, San Francisco, and the and the Rams. In fact, that show I was talking about down to Baton Rouge, they're coming to do a show from the Circa next week, and they're all going to be part of the blackjack tournament that the Circa is providing for people on Radio Row. And I think the top 10 finishers get free Super Bowl futures tickets. So we were talking about some of the futures. San Francisco is like 19-1 to win the Super Bowl. I think Seattle is also low double digits. The Cowboys are like 25-1. So there are a lot of teams, I think, this year in the NFL that I would say maybe the teams that can compete in the NFL are stronger at the top than the AFL, NFC than the top teams in the AFC. I think there's more. I think both conferences have balance, but I think the stronger teams overall may be in the NFC this year.
Well, I agree. Well, I think it was that way last year as well.
Exception being the Texans.
I've the Texans could be very tough because of that defense, and they might have. I mean, last year they had a great defense. If they can do that again, and then the question mark will be Stroud can stand up and play like he did.
They just need to have an average to slightly above average offense. They don't need to do a lot on offense other than don't make mistakes.
Right. And the contest signups are going pretty steady.
Yeah, starting to get there. Let me see. I don't have it right now. The Circa Survivor, which guarantees 20 million, meaning that they need 20,000 entries to not have to fund part of the pool, which has always been the case. They are, I believe, they are halfway there, right about halfway there at 10,000, with several weekends to go, including the big weekend for signups, which is the weekend that ends just with Labor Day weekend, which is 2 days before the start of that Wednesday night game, and the week before that, which is the first full week of college football, the weekend before. So, in fact, I even noticed from my own schedule that I get a lot of people in the last 2.5 weeks before the season begins as far as signups. So they're going to hit and exceed that 20,000. I think they're going to fall short again in the Circa Millions. Westgate is a little bit slow. Their entry in their Pick 5 contest is, I think, $1,500 as opposed to what the Circa has for their entry fees. They charge $1,000 for Survivor, $1,000 for Circa Millions. They do charge Grandissimo, and already 20 people have signed up. So they are halfway to their guarantee. They're guaranteeing 4 million, meaning they need 40 entrants. I think they had 60 something last year in that.
Yeah, they did.
But that's beyond the budget of 99% of the more than that of the population of the country. But as far as the Circa goes, last year they had the $500 entry fee for their college contest. They only paid 10 places and you get up to 10 entries, but they still drew 1,000 entries in the first year. So that was met with good reception. They will exceed that, I would imagine, this year. The $1,500, however, for their Super Contest Classic. And then they also have a $5,000 Super Contest Gold, which you also pick 5 games a week, but there's only one winner for the $5,000 winner take all. And they also have a $5,000 Survivor Contest, where I think they drew over a little bit over 100 entries. And that contest, unlike the Circa Survivor, the Westgate $5,000 Survivor Contest did not last the season. That was over, I think, in early December, if I recall correctly.
You can see Andy's logical approach, thelogicalapproach.com.
Yeah.
You can go there to find out how you can sign up through Andy, because Andy does this.
One thing I will keep in mind, you do have to be in Las Vegas in person, whether it's you or a trusted family member, colleague, whatever, because that will be the person who will be the person to whom that will be the person who will dictate who gets whatever prize money they win, even if you are the one providing the selections. In fact, once the person, let's say you have a friend in Vegas and they sign up, then all my contact is with me and you, the person who effectively paid for the entry, even though it's not in your name, but will be the one making and providing the selections.
All right, Andy, thank you very much. Covered a lot of things here today. A little short. We're going to be a little short on time today, but Andy, good luck. I'm going to be signing up in the next couple of weeks. I'll be in touch. And if I don't hear from you this week, I'll see you next Tuesday.
And we've got, I think, our podcast with Mark returning on Thursday.
We'll have to double check.
Yeah,
because
I think it's
been canceled a couple times.
Yes, hopefully. And hopefully I'll be able to make it. In fact, I got to get Greg on that and see if we can adjust the time by an hour, but we'll see.
Okay. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks to all our listeners and viewers, and let's all have a great week. And if you bet preseason, I always say look towards underdogs, but whatever you decide to do, I hope you all win.
Absolutely. Okay.